Hello, everyone, and welcome to episode 3 of the Route Select podcast. On this podcast, we talk about furry visual novels, the creators of them, and how we go about making our VNs. My name is Brick, I'm the developer of Silverstone, and I'm an assistant writer on Cleaved. So far, we've talked to some developers who've been in the scene for years, but today we'll be talking to a newer dev whose visual novel came out in February of this year. With a sci-fi mystery that has a bit of romance sprinkled in, this developer is often considered one of the new titans on the block. Please welcome Faintly Spotted. How are you doing, Faintly?
Doing great. It's my first time hearing that. I'm quite flattered. I go by Faint or Faintly. Pro tip: don't pick a 4-syllable furry handle.
All right. Would you like to tell us what projects you've worked on?
Pretty much just this one. So I am the director, writer, coder, and general everything else for Under Heaven. Like you were saying, we launched just earlier this year in February, but I think the earliest file I was able to find as far as first planning or drafting was it's like mid 2023.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Yeah, so you've been working on this for a while, for sure.
Yeah, and I mean, I don't want to give the impression that a bunch was happening back then. I think but the real sort of first draft of part one kind of happened in like December 2023, I would say.
Wow. All right, so this is a question I am asking everyone, just as a little icebreaker. Who's your current furry crush?
Oh God. Okay, so we're going with like fictional characters, I'm assuming.
Yeah, fictional.
Let's see. Do we want to limit to VNs? I'm thinking for a second.
It doesn't have to be a VN.
It feels topical though. Moontouch has kind of like laser targeted me in a variety of ways. He's not a route character, but Talwyn can get it for sure.
Oh, yeah, definitely. So, we kind of launched our VNs around the same time. Mine was January, I think. So we're about a month apart. I remember when I was on FVN seeing like your updates on like the UI and stuff. So
Yeah.
I thought to start we would talk about a bit of the creation of Under Heaven and how that came to be.
Yeah. It's kind of a broad topic, I suppose. I mean, I kind of feel like the inspiration or
a bit like let's start off like with the idea for Under Heaven, how that came to be, sort of.
Yes, that's kind of an interesting story, I suppose. I think the way that a lot of ideas for things I have like this tend to go, it's always kind of multiple different ideas that sort of consume their siblings in the womb and come together that way. Like I could probably name sort of 3 different ideas I had that eventually sort of molded into Under Heaven. Because I think the very first time I went like, I should make a VN and had like a vague idea was, God, it was probably a decade ago or something. Some crazy order of time like that.
Yeah.
It was just kind of, it was never the right time. It was always one thing or another.
Yeah, that was definitely around like the birth of furry VNs as well, because that was around the Black Gate and Echo era.
Yeah, no, I started reading them pretty early on for sure. But I think these sort of like, I think the moment where it sort of crystallized into Under Heaven, I remember very early on there was the idea of a walled city instead of a domed city, and there was kind of this idea of somebody who kind of who has left the city and has kind of returned to it as a stranger. And I had this thought of like, well, then there's probably somebody waiting for them there, and that was kind of the moment right there, I think, where it sort of clicked the thing that happened. I couldn't even really tell you when that was. That was a long ass time ago, and it changed a lot since then.
Yeah. Was that kind of the inspiration for Ash there? Someone returning?
Yeah, that was Ash. Yeah. And I think like that ended up being less of a focus thematically than where things ultimately ended up going, really. But that was probably the first moment.
Yeah, this, from what I've read of Under Heaven, it's definitely more of a mystery than just someone returning. It's someone popping up into your life out of with no explanation.
Yeah, and obviously I don't want to like, tilt my hand too much, but obviously there's a lot going on there that we'll be learning about over the course of it.
Yeah. What really kicked off the actual development? Because you said the first draft sort of was 2023.
I think that was like by the time the actual serious drafting was happening, that at that point I had committed to I'm gonna do this. This is gonna happen. And it was around very late 2023 and early 2024 that I started approaching artists. I think Rabosa might be the only one that I approached actually in 2023. He was the first person involved. The very first stuff we did was kind of Ash and Julian's designs, with the idea that would sort of serve as kind of a the blueprint for the style of the entire thing. I think in retrospect it would have been good to kind of do a bit more world concepting generally in the first place, but what can you do?
Yeah, I feel like with developing VNs you always have that, looking back in hindsight, it's like,
oh
God,
yeah, sure, absolutely.
It's like, I wish I expanded on that more.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
Yeah, and of course with something like Under Heaven, which I don't know if I call it cyberpunk. Would you call it cyberpunk?
So I think the way I specifically describe it on the itch page is a cyberpunk romance, which I think very early on when I was first writing that thing, I was kind of like, I was very precious about both of those terms because I was like, oh no, it's like it's sci-fi, it's post cyberpunk, it's some bullshit like that, and I was hesitant of like, oh, if I call it a romance, are people gonna like not take it seriously or whatever? But like, no, that's what it is. It's just like, I'm sorry, they're jacking into the Matrix or whatever. It centrally focuses on a gay relationship. It's a cyberpunk romance.
Yeah, but like with cyberpunk, there's often tons of world building involved with that. And
Sure. I think any sci-fi.
In the first chapter alone, there's definitely a ton of world building because you introduce like the Gen 2s, you introduce the whole city and everything like that.
Yeah.
You definitely do it in a good way because it does not feel heavy-handed whatsoever.
Yeah, no, I've seen some slightly mixed reactions. I think, there was very deliberately an approach of like, we're going to experience this by putting the main character in the world and seeing things through their eyes and not just like, doing a Star Wars scroll or whatever at the start where we're just doing big lore dumps. And I'm pretty happy with it, with how that's worked out. And I think that's something I've seen people be pretty complimentary about, which is always really nice to hear.
Yeah, I think for the amount each chapter, it's like 12K per chapter, right?
I think the first chapter is 12K, and it's like a little on the long side as most of them go. In general, the ballpark I've aimed for is like 10K, give or take. But really, it's kind of a question of like, okay, each one is meant to be kind of a reasonably self-contained narrative chunk or episode or whatever.
Yeah.
And, they look similar length in the outline, but fucking shit happens when you write them.
Yeah. I think for that amount of words, putting so much in there and it not feeling flooded is a sign of good writing.
Thank you.
Yeah. You mentioned contacting Rabosa.
Yeah.
In like early or late?
Late 2023. Yeah.
Yeah, and you definitely have a lot of art going on in Under Heaven. Let's just say that because you have...
Yeah.
The menu does not look like RenPy whatsoever. It looks like a completely different engine.
Yeah, no, definitely like having no default RenPy assets was definitely a specific goal because there's kind of a feeling of like, as soon as you like, if you've played these games before, you see it's like, that as soon as you feel it, and I feel like that creates kind of a negative impression, so I wanted to get away from that to the extent possible.
Yeah. So tell me about how the process of finding all the artists to help create this vision went.
Yeah, so like I said, Rabosa was the one that I approached first. I'm always going to be, frankly, extremely grateful to him for the fact that he like kind of took a chance on me because I'm just, some guy who nobody really knows. I didn't really have much of a big project portfolio or anything to show off. What it came down to was putting together like a, specific, short, concrete pitch of like, hi, I'm interested in working with you in this way. Here's the elevator pitch real quick for what this is about and why it's interesting. This is the kind of arrangement that I'm looking for. And then, of course, also having like kind of a longer pitch document right on deck if they wanted to hear more from there. And that's pretty much how I approached most people. Once the character designs for Ash and Julian got done, those were frankly a big help, I think, in just reaching out to artists because I could kind of, include those in that like initial pitch, basically. And of course, and a lot of that was also just, hey, getting used to people politely saying no, which was fine, obviously.
Yeah, you're unfortunately going to come across that when you create VNs.
Oh, sure. I think in all cases it was mostly just a case of like the timing not really working out for the person. Nobody was shitty or anything like that.
Yeah, like that's a good thing about the furry spaces. Generally, most people are nice to each other about things.
Oh yeah.
So your art team, a lot of it looks like new people in the VN space because I don't think Rabosa, NA,
nope.
Or I don't think any of them have done any prior VN work.
Strange has, Bork has, Hyena Blood has, I need to pull up the page now actually. But yeah, no, a lot of people had. The way that I ended up deciding to approach in the first place, it was literally just going down the line of like, furry artists that I follow and going like, just one at a time, going like, okay, like, are they putting out work consistently, and do they seem like they kind of align with what I want for this project? Which is kind of funny because that's how I ended up reaching out to Strange, who worked on the Echo worked on Echo, so
Yeah.
like that was kind of like that somehow completely passed me by, and I only realized it later, which is sort of funny.
Yeah, I've been meaning to reach out to him as well, actually, just for a guest CG, but
Yeah.
like the fact you got Strange is really good.
Oh yeah, no, he's been a delight to work with.
Yeah, I think my favorite CG is the one where
It's the
Ash
mirror
is
one,
looking in
right?
the mirror. Yeah.
Yep.
He did a
No, I
great
know
job.
that one is crazy, which obviously isn't to denigrate any of the other ones. Like the river scene by Bork is amazing. The
Oh, yeah.
diner scene by Hero Mule is amazing. The end of chapter 3 Stinger by Tusk is amazing. They're consistently blowing my mind. It's a lot.
The diner one I thought was really good because it's basically the same position but two different ages.
Yeah, the flip back and forth thing. Yeah, no, I was really proud of that idea.
Yeah. How do you go about telling your artist what you want? Do you make a sketch? Do you just give a description? Or
Yeah, so it varies a little bit. Honestly, I've thought about like maybe doing a panel at some point about art direction, but I don't know. So it depends because sometimes I have a fairly clear idea of what I want, and in those cases, I will give them. I will include, a really shitty MS Paint doodle or whatever as part of it, saying like, "Hey, this is the kind of composition I'm looking for." But honestly, I think the most important thing is to like, sure, get like a straightforward, like, here's what's happening in this scene, but to like give as much context as possible for like, hey, here's what the characters are feeling, here's what the mood this is supposed to kind of be, here's like what this is supposed to kind of make the reader feel. I mean, something that I, feel fairly strongly about is that this is a very collaborative process, and usually they have like better answers to a lot of these kinds of questions of specifics than I do because they're artists, they're good at this.
Yeah.
Like I'm bringing them in for, their artistic viewpoint and their kind of holistic contribution beyond just kind of being a disembodied pair of hands.
yeah.
I remember the end of chapter 3 one specifically, where there was like this really kind of nuanced emotion that we wanted to get across with Ash, and so we talked a lot back and forth about like that exact kind of what he's feeling, how to get that across.
Yeah, I believe you also, in UI terms, you have the most graphically intensive, because you have the screens that pop up, which I believe that was something that I commented
Oh yeah,
on.
the bit in the prologue.
Yeah, in the prologue, yeah.
Yeah. No, that was fun because it's kind of a like diegetic overlay because the characters using like their cybernetic implants basically.
Yeah, how did that work? Was that mostly talking to Hyena Blood and then programming that as a screen?
Yeah, no, I mean it's just a screen. I forget if it even is a screen. It might just be some images, honestly. Because I mean, the thing is that like on a technical level, it's not really doing anything that impressive. It literally is just putting some images on the screen. Which you can do that in RimPy.
Yeah.
Well, that was actually kind of I remember that one had a kind of a very interesting little sort of moment of sort of realize getting to put more stuff about the work in as it was coming together like that. If you look very closely at the error messages on that screen, there's some kind of like ominous hinting at some future stuff that we end up kind of sneaking in there, which was not in the written script obviously, but that was kind of fun.
I might have to go back and reread that to see what's popping up. Speaking of like all the artists that are on the team, you have quite a big one for your first team.
No denying that. I mean, it was mostly a question of just like I want to be able to get builds out relatively quickly, so be able to divide the work more.
Yeah. How does managing a team like that go? Because Silverstone also kind of has a big team for what it is, but we're still pretty small compared to you.
Yeah, I mean, honestly, it's not a thing I've had too much in the way of issues with. Really, I just kind of like, throw everyone in a Telegram folder at the start of the week. I kind of look at and go like, okay, this person has something. Should probably check in on this thing. Just kind of update myself on where everything's at. I mean, I've professionally worked on projects that had multiple people involved trying to do some big complicated things. So I'm already kind of familiar with the general notion of like, thinking around in terms of like, does somebody have work that is blocking somebody else? And that needs to happen first, that kind of thing. It's part of why I actually draft the scripts themselves, very far in advance, because if we run out of, road on that front, everything stops. So like I can't be the blocker. That's a bad situation to be in.
Yeah, I can definitely relate to that. You have 2 editors, I believe, Amber and Kite.
Yeah.
So how does that work out? Because they do different kinds of editing.
Yeah. So Amber is an old friend of mine. So they do developmental editing basically. So we've kind of like had a lot of back and forth talking about high level stuff, but probably the most important thing is like we actually go through and edit the outline before I start drafting things, and like sort of the flow of how scenes work together, a lot of stuff like that. They did some more heavy kind of line editing type stuff in part one that they've been backing off of it because they've busy with their own stuff, all that kind of thing. And then the idea is that Kite does the kind of more regular line editing. And it was also, you might also see in the credits, sensitivity reading, just because like, hey, Ash is a trans man, I'm not. I wanted to have somebody on board who could speak to that experience because I figure I'm probably gonna miss stuff just kind of by nature of the thing.
Yeah, I think that's definitely very important to have in a story like this.
Yeah, and I mean, I don't want to I don't want to overplay that part because at the end of the day, if you're bringing in somebody as a sensitivity reader or something like that, well, you're still choosing who to bring in, and like ultimately the buck kind of stops with me.
Yeah, and with Benny, this kind of also applies to art direction. How do you talk about music with him?
Oh boy. I'm gonna be honest. Hang on. Let me send you something really quick because this is gonna be a great audio experience, I'm sure.
Oh.
We go back and forth a lot. So important context here. I already knew Benny before I ever started working on Under Heaven. The way in which we work together would be kind of crazy and not necessarily recommend for most things, but just we have a fairly casual relationship, so we're able to just just send me something. It's like, oh, what do you think of this? And we'll go back and forth honestly quite a lot. He's definitely like one of the artists who's been brought in pretty heavily on like the story and its themes and stuff. So similar to what I was saying earlier about kind of giving artists some freedom to articulate how they want to work around things. Like there's a fair bit of that where I'm just like, yeah, I'll give them kind of like a general vibe and maybe and we have kind of a high level idea of how we want to use certain instrumentation. But so that image I sent you is some of the draft titles of things that get sent back and forth.
Yes. So obviously,
there's a lot going on.
Obviously, I can't show this in the actual video, so I'll just read some of these aloud. A goon cave, but it's for baking. Daddy got a little stuck kitten. And do people still say, oh, there's even more? Oh my god. Penis delirious. Oh my god. The way she iterated on my melody got my motif recurring.
We love Benny.
Yeah, that's funny. I'm glad you guys have a relationship like that where you can just share stuff like that.
Yeah.
There's definitely like the music in Under Heaven is very interesting because those tracks are very cyberpunk and almost that are very orchestral.
Yeah, so we had kind of an idea. I think I sort of alluded to it earlier, but there was kind of an idea with the music of like, okay, so some of the more electronic instrumentation is going to lean more towards the kind of exploitative or artificial sort of parts of the setting, whereas we want to kind of use more organic instrumentation for the more kind of stuff that's supposed to be more kind of the human touch or whatever. And that's kind of a thing that's a ongoing topic within the project, I would say.
Yeah, it also kind of touches on, I believe the Under Heaven page says this, but it's about like art, and I think that applies.
Yeah, I mean, that's one of the things where I'm not sure how much to say because I kind of don't want to tip my hand too much, but no, it is definitely a central topic and a central thing that it's concerned with. Like, in chapter 1, you meet Julian in the exchange where he kind of is an artist and he's, creating his own little sort of, magical realm or whatever, and obviously he has a lot of feelings about it and how he relates to it, and there's going to be a lot of stuff going on there.
And I mean, we're kind of already experiencing stuff like that with like Photoshop and things like that, where we try to create these realistic landscapes within a digital realm. And that's basically what Julian is doing, is kind of a transhumanistic version of that.
Yeah, no, I mean, kind of the reductive way of putting it is like, he's kind of got the VR chat, but more sort of thing going on. And I think also more broadly, like, it's kind of about, in some ways, just sort of being a furry or being in a community that is very like kind of centralized around art and thinking about art and talking about art. Like Julian and Lark's sort of relationship is a lot about this kind of creativity and stuff that they share in that kind of way.
Yeah. Speaking of like landscapes, art, and stuff like that, let's talk about sort of the whole aesthetic of Under Heaven when it comes to the city of Megiddo. Because when people think cyberpunk, they like stuff like Neuromancer, Johnny Mnemonic, and Blade Runner. It's often these like dark, dank areas with neon lighting going on.
And the rain, gotta have the rain. Well, I mean, credit to the classics. That is how we opened with the prologue.
Yeah, it is. But with Under Heaven, a lot of it's like, despite there being the cyberpunk elements like plugging in and stuff like that, the exchange, it looks very much like a town you would see in real life.
Yeah, so I mean, kind of the way we've sort of been describing the art direction internally is like mundane cyberpunk or working class cyberpunk. You know, none of these characters are like shadow runners who are about to whip out a neurowire or whatever. They're just kind of some guys, basically.
Yeah.
And a lot of the problems they face are meant to be like, yeah, man, he's got to pay rent. That's an issue.
God, when that scene happened in the opening, that was terrifying, actually.
Yeah. yeah. No, because I mean, yeah, the story's, tipping my hand a little bit here, going to go some fairly wild places, and so it was really important to me that like we kind of start from a place of like, yeah, this just kind of being a place where people live for kind of the gravity of stuff that happens later to land properly.
Yeah.
But yeah, no, I mean, it was definitely very, very much kind of a deliberate choice.
Yeah, and I think it definitely works in its favor because you go through like the daytime scene with Julian.
Yeah.
Everything seems pretty normal when it gets to the party section.
Yeah.
Then later on, when he's walking home, it kind of shifts to that more artificial cyberpunk aesthetic when he finds Ash in the alley.
Yeah. And I think we were looking at the like the Ghost in the Shell sort of spider tanks from the design of the shitty little cleaning drone.
Yeah, that's a very good way of putting it. Yeah, it goes in the shell for sure.
Yeah. No, I mean it's okay. I remember what I was gonna say earlier. I mean, kind of a joke we had was that like, yeah, this is the future. Cyberpunk as brought to you by HP instead of as brought to you by Apple, basically. Like everything's just kind of basic and shitty. And I will say there's also kind of a bit of deliberate like almost cheating a little bit in how contemporary everything looks, because in theory this is very far in the future, but it is also like, yeah, but it's got this thing going on. It's very much intended to be descended from the contemporary United States, basically, and that is kind of the space that it inhabits thematically.
Yeah, and this is a thing with just sci-fi in general, but even with things far in the future, a lot of times they're portrayed like, oh, technology has advanced like really fast. In real life, we probably would still be around the same level today, like 100 years.
Well, I mean, I don't know. I mean, you look back 100 years, the world's basically unrecognizable. I think that if you go that far in the future, things are going to be unrecognizable in ways that we couldn't even imagine, frankly.
That is
but
true.
but like, if you're going to tell that sort of story, then you need to be willing to like reimagine society from the ground up, basically, which is a pretty Herculean undertaking, and there's no real guarantee it's going to land with your readers. But with Underheaven, though, my intent was definitely very much to write Cyberpunk kind of to the present moment, I would say.
Yeah, and I think you captured that perfectly.
Thank you.
And when it comes to storytelling, you do something that other VNs have done, but not to like an extended level. You have dual protagonists with Julian and Ash. It flip-flops between them at certain parts in the story. What are the challenges when it comes to that? Because when it comes to VNs, I imagine there's a lot of challenges that come up with that.
I mean, I wouldn't say I've really experienced it much as a specific challenge. I mean, it's not like I have a huge, backlog of writing the other way instead that I had to break out of or anything. But yeah, no, I mean, Minotaur Hotel and Arch has kind of flipped their perspectives around a bit. Sort of explaining why I did that is kind of a long story, I guess. It kind of comes from a couple different places. I guess the big one is just the fact that, like, I knew very early on that I was writing kind of a romance, and I've really never been that much of a fan of kind of like blank slate protagonists in that type of situation where you kind of have this, really interesting opposing character who has a lot going on, and then you kind of emote at them and listen to their tragic backstory. Now they like you, which okay, that sounded really catty. I'm not to like denigrate a lot of other VNs that take approaches similar to that, and I think there's a lot of cool stuff in there, obviously. But like, I was definitely very interested in like, no, okay, I want these to be two sort of very specific people who have like a very specific kind of nuanced relationship between them, and that's the story that I was excited about telling, basically. And I think similarly, I've always been like a little bit like, I've never really been that enchanted by the concept of choice in games, which I kind of a heretical opinion, I guess. But like, I don't know. To me, it often felt like a bit of a parlor trick that it's either the kind of red ending, green ending sort of thing, or it's just like somebody says like, "Hey, I remember that line you said a while back." But I guess my interest in the game was very much to tell like, yeah, pretty strictly linear, but kind of more focused story. That's kind of been the watchword for, I guess, most of development.
Yeah, I don't think it's necessarily heretical to not like choices in visual novels, because there are visual novels where there's like no choices. Like
yeah,
a huge example.
Ad Astra.
Yeah, Ad Astra is a big one.
I mean, there's like one branch that's just a game over or something.
I believe so. I think it's like you make a couple different choices, but it's not clear like
Yeah,
what
yeah.
happens.
And I will say there's also some production realities there too, because I really love like the Zero Escape series, which goes
Oh, yes.
crazy with choices, but also like that would be a really challenging game to release like episodically and sequentially.
Yeah, I would love to make a Zero Escape style furry visual novel, but
yeah, I know like Password and Trainwreck are out there and doing good works, which is awesome. But I was definitely kind of thinking of like, yeah, like I want to make sure this is kind of relatively easy for people to follow from one update to the next. I mean, even with VNs with very simple branching, I always had the issue of like, oh god, I don't remember what I did on this route. The last time I updated was like 8 months ago.
yeah, I would like to definitely work on a Zero Escape style novel. It's just there's so much art and programming you have to keep in mind, and I would probably just release it all at once purely because of that reason.
Yeah. I mean, that's the thing. I mean, the Zero Escape games worked as box products. They weren't publishing on Patreon or anything.
Yeah, I think Trainwreck kind of has the advantage of it's very linear compared to like Zero Escape.
Okay, I've not actually played that one. I can't specifically speak to it, unfortunately.
But yeah, Julian and Ash, what I find interesting is not only like aesthetically, but narratively they're different. Because like with Julian, he wears almost like clothes we would wear nowadays. They're like a lot of like just casual fabric and stuff like that. Whereas Ash dresses in like this cyberpunk jacket almost.
So not even joking. Literally in the art notes, I was like, okay, so this is all very grounded. People all wear like normal clothes. Ash is the one person who ought to have a cool cyberpunk jacket.
I find that really
hang on. I think I have a draft I need to send you, because I think we literally have one of the earlier ones where I was like make it more Akira, and it came back. I was like, that's too Akira. I know I've got it in here somewhere. 1 second. Yes. Okay. Behold the Akira jacket.
Oh my god, that is just Akira. I love it, but it's like, yeah, I can see that.
Yeah.
But yeah, it also I find it a very ironic outfit as well, because Ash's whole thing is he wants to be invisible, but he's kind of the character that stands out because of that.
Yeah, no, I mean, the way I always think about it, he's kind of like, it's almost not even like invisible, it's just he's always like kind of like, he's a cornered wild animal. That's kind of the way I put it in my head.
Yeah, that's a good way of putting it.
It's very, very like, you can even see in those early faces we had there on that draft, like immediate kind of fight or flight sort of person.
Yeah, especially the one, the expression on the top left.
Yeah.
When it comes to writing Julian and Ash, is there any like sort of difficulty like writing the different characters, or is it pretty easy to find their separate voices?
Yeah, I mean the rest of the main cast too. I've tried to aim for fairly at least meaningfully distinct voices for them. I remember with Ash specifically, I think the fear I actually had with him was specifically that he might speak too similarly to Amir, because they both have kind of this like gruff masculine kind of man of few words sort of speaking style. But there's a couple key differences between the big one that people probably notice most readily is just that Amir kind of rounds off his words a bit. He uses a lot of like going, doing, that kind of stuff. And then like Ash tends to be like a little bit more kind of like firm and decisive. He'll have an ellipses, but then he won't really pause once he starts speaking, stuff like that. But yeah, I remember when I actually put on the Patreon at one point kind of a style guide if people wanted to do translations, and part of that was talking about like, okay, here's kind of the goals with the voice of each character, basically.
Honestly, that's something I should probably do as well, because there is a Russian translation of Silverstone, and I'm like,
nice.
I don't know how it's being written. Because I do not speak Russian.
Yeah, no, a couple of folks have approached me about that as well, and I kind of put up like, hey, here's just the general stance and policy on it, and I think there's some in progress. I know there's at least one in Chinese. Or at least it's being worked on anyway, but I don't really know much as far as further details.
Yeah.
Because like obviously I'd love to get a professional translation someday, but when I first just kind of looked into that, the cost of doing it properly for something with a super high word count is just astronomical.
Yeah, for sure. I do notice, like, between Ash and Amir, I think another difference is that Amir kind of has this sort of sweetness, like, especially when he talks to Julian, whereas Ash is very, like, all of his things are, like, repressed.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Amir's kind of a bit of a down home sort of boy. He's, and I think as far as other differences, like Amir's got a lot more of the kind of like sort of like grunting kind of stuff going on, just in terms of just how he carries himself, how he expresses himself.
Yeah, but one of like the huge things with Amir is like his Gen 2s. Is that what they are?
Yeah, the Gen 2s.
Yeah, they got fucked over basically.
Yep.
And
yep.
Like a lot of what's brought up in Under Heaven is basically medical horror. Like especially in the beginning, also with Julian, he gets overloaded and starts seizing. So did that involve like any thoughts about transhumanism, or was that just something that came up, I guess?
Yeah, I mean, it was. I think I kind of always viewed the like the sort of exchange versus Gen 2 thing as like in a way it really is just kind of in the vein of Cyberpunk, kind of reproducing on people's bodies the exact sort of way that things have always operated. The exchange permits all of this kind of cool, interesting, creative stuff, but the way that the kind of technology is incentivized to develop is kind of along this vector of greater and greater exploitation, basically.
Yeah, definitely.
The kind of jokingly, the difference was that if the exchange is VR chat and Gen 2s are whatever Meta's fucking thing is, it's like in the future, cool Cyberpunk stuff will be some shit that your boss makes you do.
Yeah, which is genuinely horrifying.
Yep. Yeah. No, I mean, another sort of thought that was kind of salient really early on in kind of the drafting was that one thing you'll notice is kind of absent, or at least plays a relatively little role in the story, is like AI and all that kind of stuff, because I mean at the end of the day, kind of where I was at with the story was like, well, I'm actually kind of less interested in how machines might sort of kind of resemble a person than in how people are made to be like machines. Like there's this thing that I always kind of go back to. Pre-AI, the kind of like SEO optimized sort of BuzzFeed slop article. Those are all written by hand by human beings, but at a certain point, kind of what's the difference?
Yeah, and I think a lot of cyberpunk media doesn't really. I think what I mean more is like a lot of people when they watch cyberpunk media, I think they see the cool augments.
Oh sure, yeah, it's the wow cool robot thing with the point kind of going over their head.
Yeah, they're like, wow, this is so cool, but in actuality, it's like the whole thing with Edge Runners is David, he becomes more and more augmented throughout the story, and things end horribly.
Sure. I mean, that's, I feel like that's kind of a tale as old as time with like any sort of media consumption. It's the old joke about how, you can't really make an war movie because anytime people see war on screen, they're like, oh, sick.
Yeah.
But I guess I would say that like at the same time though, I mean, I think an important kind of through thread in Under Heaven, I mean, like the exchange is certainly not portrayed as like a bad thing. It's not just a general like boo technology sort of story.
Yeah. I don't think like cyberpunk media is like that. I think it's more losing oneself.
Well, sure. I mean, I guess in the same way that Under Heaven, it's always kind of about like, this intersection of kind of capital and technology and how it begins to encroach on people's bodies, basically.
Yeah. There is definitely also, like, you talk about classism for sure, because when they're in the diner, Ash mentions like Julian's family and how he's able to get the Gen 2s.
Yeah, and it's like kind of a point of tension between him and not really tension. It's a thing that it's a one-sided like thing that Julian sort of feels guilty about when he talks to Amir, because part of Amir's situation is that he's like in more substantial debt for his implants than Julian was, because like Julian kind of came from a more affluent background.
Yeah, I can relate a bit to Amir because you might notice my voice is very scratchy. That is because of medical mishap.
Oh gosh.
Yeah, so the medical horror definitely hits a lot.
Oof.
But yeah, since we're on the topic of like talking about different cyberpunk media, was there any like specific stories from that genre that influenced Under Heaven?
Not a lot specifically. I mean, I think, the notion of the exchange is probably the most comparable to like the Matrix or Transistor or something, maybe if I had to pick some.
Yeah.
I just please to God don't compare it to Ready Player One. I will actually be offended.
My mind went to existence before Ready Player One, so.
Thank you. But yeah, no, I mean, it was relatively, I guess, concept first, I would say. I kind of backed into it and found myself in Cyberpunk in a way, I guess.
Yeah.
I mean, like I said, I was kind of being very precious early on about, I don't know if I want to call it Cyberpunk, before somebody kind of like sat me down and was like, dude.
there is definitely like Cyberpunk elements.
They're jacking in. It's Cyberpunk.
I mean, it carries a lot of themes of Cyberpunk, so I would definitely call it Cyberpunk because.
Yeah. No, I mean, pretty unambiguously. So if I'm being honest.
Yeah, Cyberpunk is not just about like the aesthetic; it's also about the messaging, and Under Heaven carries a lot of that.
Yeah, I remember they talked about something similar about Transistor, where they were like, yeah, we kind of started from like knowing we wanted to make Cyberpunk, and then we like immediately removed all of the kind of stereotypical Cyberpunk stuff and saw where that ended us up. And that was a very cool game aesthetically.
Yeah, I actually still need to play Transistor. It looks very good. Another thing that came to mind was a slightly controversial subgenre called Hope Punk. There's a lot of that in Under Heaven, I feel like.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not necessarily familiar with that. I don't know if I can speak to it in much depth.
Pulling it up right now. Hope Punk is a subgenre of speculative fiction conceived as the opposite of grimdark. Works in Hope Punk subgenre are about characters fighting for positive change, radical kindness, and communal responses to challenges.
Okay, I mean, depending on how loosely you interpret that could be like most fiction, frankly. I mean, the characters don't, like, you got me. The characters don't want bad things to happen to them.
Yeah, that is fair. I think that is why it's a controversial subgenre.
Sure. I mean, I tend to kind of avoid a lot of this super sort of like, semantics argument about how you classify this or that, honestly.
Yeah.
Not that those distinctions are without value, but I'm like, like after the fact, you can call it whatever you want to, frankly.
Yeah.
Like the thing kind of is the thing itself on its own merits.
Yeah, I mean, you don't even have the Cyberpunk tag. You just put it as sci-fi, which is...
Oh, no, that's just been me like swapping around different itch tags to see what actually works.
Oh God, I hate
I wish they gave me I wish they gave us more spaces because that'd be kind of nice.
Yeah, I'm like, why only 10 tags? Jeez.
I mean, I get it because the alternative is doing the like, Amazon thing of like baby shoes never worn, shoes for boys, shoes for girls, gift shoes, fucking anniversary presents. I don't know, like if it under that paradigm, there would be no incentive to not just blast the maximum number of tags that you could, which would also suck. But the 10 limit is certainly a little vexing at times.
Yeah, I think extending it to 15 would be a good like.
Sure, that seems fine to me. I think it has bigger problems right now, so
a lot of problems. But I think one interesting thing definitely with Under Heaven is despite all the cyberpunk like sort of influence that is in there, it doesn't really feel cyberpunk all that much. It definitely feels like people just living in this domed city. Like there's a lot of commentary about art, romanticism, and a lot of things we can relate to nowadays as well.
Yeah, I mean, again, the plot's definitely going to kind of pick up and start getting into some weirder stuff as things progress. But it was kind of, like I said, very important for me to kind of establish sort of this world and the characters' kind of place in it first, basically.
Yeah. One thing, Bowser Puma also had this in chord progressions, but he didn't add it until recently. Under Heaven has a streamer mode, and we talked about this a bit in a server we're both in, but
yeah.
How has the streamer mode sort of impacted the message or the overall reception of the game as well?
I have mixed feelings on it, and I'm not sure if I would have done it the same way again in the future, because, kind of cards on the table, like, I really did not actually want to make a streamer mode, if I'm being honest. Like, I feel pretty strongly about, like, hey, like, there is a sex scene in this, like, work of art, this piece of fiction, because that is where I wanted there to be a sex scene. Like, I don't think these things can just be arbitrarily removed. I think that's, kind of bullshit. And so I guess if I'm being honest, I sort of implement the streamer mode in a very kind of petulant way, where like it will at the start of a possible scene just like say like, hey, if you want to, you can skip this scene, skipping this is not the recommended experience, and like, this is not really how you're supposed to experience this story. And I think whenever I've seen people hit that in videos, they've been a bit less than thrilled with me. So, sorry.
Yeah, I avoided watching any videos because I was like, I don't want to know.
Yeah. I'm kind of like, oh, maybe I should have just not included that. I don't know, because I would be pretty extraordinarily hesitant about like doing actual censored versions of scenes, because like, I mean, you can't do like a particularly censored version of an explicit sex scene. Like, that's kind of ridiculous. That's not really gonna, if you're like leaving the same text anywhere in there anyway, that's not necessarily gonna save people from Twitch or wherever.
Yeah,
but I guess kind of ultimately my take was like, okay, well, maybe this will help signal where they should just kind of start censoring themselves and keep going. But yeah, I don't know. It's definitely a bit of an awkward middle ground.
Yeah, like Twitch and YouTube, I get why they do stuff like this, but they do definitely crack down way too much. And I think if I had played Under Heaven in the streamer mode, I feel like I would have missed out a lot.
No, you would have missed that. Like, you would have missed the whole conversation with Lark. You would have missed the scene with Amir.
Yeah, I feel like having it, like, playing as intended is definitely the only way to really play Under Heaven.
Yeah, I don't know. I'm still not kind of resolved on what I want to do about it. I want to just keep up doing that or kind of change how I do it. I'm still really not sure. I mean, ideally, these like platforms just kind of come to their senses, but I'm not exactly holding my breath for that. And hey, I also like, it is certainly good for the project for people to be able to show it in some capacity. On a personal level, I love getting to see people's reactions when they're actually playing it.
Oh yeah.
But I mean, maybe it's just better to be straightforward and say like, hey, if you're gonna play this, you gotta censor it yourself. Have fun. All right. Continuing my like train of this being an incredible audio experience where the audience is definitely not missing out on anything. Here's this like, I'll show you, like some of the censoring that somebody did when they streamed the game themselves.
Oh yeah, that's funny.
Yeah, nothing suspicious going on under that Telegram sticker. No, sirree.
That's frosting. That's not.
Yeah, that's frosting. No, it's
suspicious.
Just. Wow, he looks really upset about the fact that he's spilling all that frosting. Anyway.
But yeah, definitely. Well, I guess that kind of answers my last question, which is, if you had started developing Under Heaven in 2025, this question doesn't make sense considering it technically came out in 2025.
Sure.
What would you have done differently?
Yeah, there's definitely a couple things that would have done differently. Like, I'm still not sure if I would do the streamer thing differently, because frankly, I'm just like, I'm not yet resolved on what the right answer to that is. Maybe I'll change my mind later. I think, like I mentioned earlier, like, I would have been nice to do some kind of sort of more general like visual setting concepting, basically, to kind of help the whole thing have a slightly more coherent look. But things have gone fine there, but it could have been slightly better. I do actually have one big one though, which is that I think I would have launched with 3 chapters instead of 1. Unfortunately, initially the game definitely got dinged a couple times in reviews for people just going like, well, I don't really know what's going on yet, or like, this is too short, or stuff like that. And kind of unfortunately, the nature of it having like a 5-star review algorithm is that like even just a couple low ratings can take a lot of 5-star ratings to cancel out. And that kind of feels like a bit of an unforced error in retrospect, I guess. But what can you do?
I definitely can relate to that with Silverstone, because the prologue in the first chapter is a lot of setup, and
that's exactly how it is.
It ends right before the route split starts. So
yep,
it did get dinged a couple times because people are like, "There's not stuff really happening yet."
Yeah, I mean, I as a developer, it would take a pretty heroic amount of self-restraint for me to have been, when did chapter 3 come out? Like a month or 2 ago? Like, that would have been like another, 4-6 months of just chilling, sitting on top of all this stuff and not be able to release it yet. That would have driven me insane.
Yeah. Build 3 it was live on Twitch 41 days ago, so about a month.
Okay, yeah. Right, and it was a little before that because it was kind of a surprise. Well, not surprise, an unplanned launch during all the payment processor stuff.
Yeah,
that was just like being distributed on like Blue Sky or whatever at the time. But yeah, no, I mean having a big enough like first build together is definitely something that I think would probably be my biggest like message to somebody who's thinking about being about to launch something. Honestly.
Yeah, definitely, and it is definitely very hard to like figure out how much that is, because
Yeah.
Each author has their own interpretations of that.
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of the amount of content at an absolute level. It's also just kind of a, story and pacing thing. Has shit kicked off yet or not, basically.
Yeah. Well, thanks for joining us, Faintly.
My pleasure.
Would you like to share where people can find you, where they can find Under Heaven?
Yeah, so Under Heaven can be found at faintlyspotted.itch.io/underheaven. The Blue Sky, I think, is also just, it's underheavenvn.bluesky.social. Those are probably the best main places. Those kind of link out to the other stuff, the Discord, the Patreon, whatever.
All right.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, no problem. And on the next episode of the Route Select podcast, we are going to be talking to someone who's made quite a few furry visual novels. We'll be talking to Erebus Wolf, who has worked on Maywolf and on November. See you guys in the next episode. Have a good day.